Hello everybody. Welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra, and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze. So, sit back, relax, and grab a cup of tea if you'd like. Tonight, we jump back into Erin Hunter's Forest of Secrets, the third book of the Warrior series. Chapter 9. Yellowfang's Den. In Yellowfang's den, Fireheart explained what had happened while Cinderpaw inspected the gash on Brackenpaw's leg and brought him a poultice to put on it. "You'd better rest here tonight," the gray she-cat told the apprentice. "But I'm pretty sure your leg will be good as new in a day or two," she spoke cheerfully, without any bitterness that her own leg would never recover so well. Turning to Fireheart, she added, "I just had Cloudkit in here. He told me he had to go over to the elders to check their coats for ticks, so I gave him some mouse bile." "What's that for?" asked Brackenpaw. If you put some on the ticks, they soon drop off," Cinderpaw told him, her blue eyes glimmering with amusement. "But don't lick your paws afterwards. It's foul stuff." "I'm sure Cloudkit will enjoy doing that," Fireheart grimaced. "It's a pity that Tigerclaw had to punish him, though, because I don't think it was his fault that the badger attacked him." Cinderpaw shrugged. "There's no arguing with Tigerclaw." "That's true," Fireheart agreed. "Anyway, I think I'll go and make sure that Cloudkit's okay." As soon as he set his paws in the elder's den, his nose wrinkled against the reek of the mouse bile. Small Ear was lying on one side, while Cloudkit searched his gray fur for ticks. The elder twitched as Cloudkit dabbed some of the mouse bile inside his hind leg. "Watch it, young kit. Keep your claws sheathed." "They are sheathed," muttered Cloudkit, his face screwed up with disgust. "There, that's got it. You're done, Small Ear." Dappletail, who had been watching intently, glanced around at Fireheart. "Your kin is very efficient, Fireheart," she rasped. "No, Cloudkit," she added, as the kit started towards her, carrying the mouse-biled soaked moss. "I'm sure I've no ticks, and I wouldn't wake One Eye if I were you." She nodded to where the old cat was sleeping, curled up beside the trunk of the fallen tree. "She won't thank you for disturbing her." Cloudkit looked around hopefully. None of the other elders were there. "Can I go then?" he asked. "You can see to One Eye later," Fireheart meowed. "Meanwhile, you'd better get the dirty bedding out of here. Come on, I'll help you." "And make sure it's the new lot's dry," growled Small Ear. Together, Fireheart and Cloudkit raked out the old moss and heather and made several trips to carry it out of the camp. Fireheart showed Cloudkit how to clean the mouse bile from his paws by rubbing them in the snow. "Now we'll go and fetch some fresh moss," he meowed. "Come on, I know a good place." "I'm tired," Cloudkit complained as he trailed after Fireheart. "I don't want to do this." "Well, too bad, you have to," Fireheart retorted. "Cheer up. It could be worse. Did I tell you that when I was an apprentice, I had to look after Yellowfang all on my own?" "Yellowfang?" Cloudkit's eyes widened. I bet she was a grump. Did she claw you?" "Only with her tongue," Fireheart replied, "and that's sharp enough." Cloudkit let out a short purr of laughter. To Fireheart's relief, he stopped complaining, and when they came to the patch of deep moss, he did his share of digging it out of the snow, and copied Fireheart as he showed him how to shake the worst of the moisture off. They were returning to the camp, their jaws laden with moss, when Fireheart saw a cat slip out of the gorse tunnel and bound up the side of the ravine. The massive body, stripped and striped pelt were unmistakable. It was Tigerclaw. Fireheart narrowed his eyes. The deputy had looked almost furtive, peering around before he left the tunnel and disappearing over the lip of the ravine as fast as possible. Fireheart felt uneasy. Something wasn't quite right. "Cloudkit," he meowed, dropping his wad of moss on the ground. "Take your load of bedding to the elders, and then come back for mine. There's something I've got to do." Cloudkit mewed in agreement, threw his mouth full of moss, and carried on toward the tunnel. Fireheart turned and raced back up the slope to the place where Tigerclaw had disappeared. The clan deputy was out of sight, but between his scent trail and the massive paw prints in the snow, Fireheart had no difficulty following him. He took care not to catch up, in case Tigerclaw saw or smelled him. The trail led unwaveringly through tall pines past Tree Cut Place. Fireheart realized with a jolt that Tigerclaw had been heading for Two Lake Place. His heart lurched with fear. Was the deputy on his way to find Princess, Fireheart's sister? Maybe he was so angry with Cloudkit that he wanted to hurt the kid's mother. Fireheart had never told the clan exactly where Princess lived, but it wouldn't be impossible for Tigerclaw to pick up her scent from his knowledge of Cloudkit's. He kept low, careful to move silently. As the trail wound through a clump of gorse, movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention. It was a mouse, scuffling under one of the bushes. Fireheart did not want to stop and hunt, but this mouse was practically begging to be caught. Instinctively, his body dropped into a hunting crouch as he crept up on the prey. His pounce landed him squarely on top of it, and he took a moment longer to bury it in the snow before he began to follow Tigerclaw again. Fireheart moved more quickly now, afraid of what the deputy might have done in the time he had delayed. As he rounded the stump of a fallen tree, he practically collided with Tigerclaw himself, loping along in the opposite direction. The deputy reared back in surprise. "Mousebrain," he hissed. "What are you doing here?" Fireheart's reaction was one of relief. Tigerclaw hadn't possibly had time to reach Two Lake Place and harm Princess already. Then he realized that the deputy was glaring at him with a look of deep suspicion in his amber eyes. He mustn't know I was following him, Fireheart thought desperately. "I came out to show Cloudkit a good place to find bedding," he stammered, "and then I thought I might as well hunt for a bit." "I don't see any prey," growled Tigerclaw. "It's buried just back there." Fireheart jerked his head in the direction he had come. The warrior narrowed his eyes. "Show me." Furious that Tigerclaw didn't believe him, but also deeply relieved at the luck that had led him to catch prey, Fireheart led the way back along the trail and scraped the snow away from the mouse he had just buried. Satisfied? The clan deputy frowned at him. Fireheart could almost read his thoughts. He was dying to blame Fireheart for something, but couldn't manage it in time. At last he grunted. "Get on with it, then." He dipped his head to pick up Fireheart's mouse and marched off in the direction of camp. Fireheart watched him go and then started running along the trail again toward Two Lake Place. He could at least find out where Tigerclaw had been. He swiveled his ears backwards from time to time. He wouldn't put it past Tigerclaw to turn back and follow him. But he heard nothing, and gradually he began to relax. Tigerclaw's scent trail came to an end near the fence that enclosed the Two Lake territory. Fireheart walked back and forth under the trees, studying the ground. The snow was churned up by the marks of many paws, too many for him to read. There were many strange scents, too. Several cats had been here and recently. Fireheart wrinkled his nose in disgust. The cat scents were muddled up with those of a long dead prey and the stink of two-leg rubbish. Except for Tigerclaw's own scent, it was impossible to identify any of them. Thinking deeply, Fireheart sat washing his paws. There was no way of telling whether Tigerclaw had met these unknown cats or whether he had just crossed their trail. He was about to set off for camp again when he heard a meow from behind him. "Fireheart! Fireheart!" Springing to his paws, he whirled around. Sitting on the fence at the end of her two-legged garden was his sister, Princess. Instantly, Fireheart raced across the fence and leapt up beside her. Princess broke into a deep, throaty purr and rubbed the side of her face against his. "Fireheart, you're so thin," she exclaimed, pulling away from him. "Are you getting enough to eat?" "No, nor is any cat in the clan," Fireheart admitted. "Prey is scarce in this weather." "Are you hungry now?" his sister asked. "There's a bowl of food in my two-legged nest. You can have it if you like." For a couple of heartbeats, Fireheart was tempted. His mouth watered at the thought of filling his belly with food he hadn't had to catch first. But common sense won. He couldn't possibly return to camp with two-leg scents all over him, and the warrior code forbade him to eat before feeding the rest of the clan. "Thanks, Princess, but I can't," he meowed. "I hope you're feeding Cloudkit," Princess mewed anxiously. I've been watching for you for days, so can you tell me how he is? He's doing well, Fireheart replied. He'll be made an apprentice soon. Princess's eyes shone with pride, and Fireheart felt a prickle of uncertainty in his fur. He knew how much it meant to his sister to have given her firstborn to the clan. There was no way he could let her have any doubts about how the kit was settling into clan life. Cloud Kit's strong and brave, he told her, and intelligent, and nosy, spoiled, disrespectful, he added to himself. But surely Cloud Kit would learn soon enough when he grew used to the clan ways. I'm sure he'll make a fine warrior, he meowed. Princess purred. Of course he will. Will you teach him? Fireheart's ears twitched with embarrassment. Princess thought he found it easy being a warrior. He didn't know the problems he had inside the clan, or how difficult it was to decide what was the right thing to do when he discovered things that affected the clan. I'd better go, he mewed. I'll come to visit you again soon, and when New Leaf comes, I'll bring Cloud Kit with me. He gave Princess an affectionate lick in farewell, and left her purring even harder at the thought of seeing her beloved Kit again. Fireheart padded back along Tiger Claw's scent trail, keeping a lookout for prey as he went. After telling Tiger Claw he was hunting, he knew he had better return to camp with a respectable catch. Gradually, he became aware of an unfamiliar sound. He had to pause and think before he realized what it was. Somewhere, water was dripping. Glancing around, he saw a silver globule bulging at the end of a thorn twig. The droplet swelled and glittered in the sunlight before falling to melt a tiny hole in the snow. Fireheart raised his head. The patter of water was all around him now, and a warm breeze ruffled his fur. With the surge of joy, he realized that the harsh season of leaf bare was drawing to an end. Soon, New Leaf would come, and prey would be plentiful again. The thaw had begun. Chapter 10. Back in camp, Fireheart spotted Bluestar leaving the nursery. Quickly, he dropped his catch on the pile of fresh kill and padded over to her. Yes, Fireheart, what is it? The leader asked. Her voice was calm, but with a sinking feeling, Fireheart knew that the lack of warmth meant she had not forgiven him for asking about the missing ThunderClan kits. He lowered his head respectfully. Bluestar, I was hunting near Two Lake Place, and... Why there? Bluestar interrupted. Sometimes I think you spend too much time near Two Lake Place, Fireheart. I just thought there might be prey there, Fireheart stammered. Anyway, while I was there, I smelled some strange cats. At once, Bluestar was alert. Her ears flicked up, and she fixed her eyes intently on Fireheart. How many cats? What clan were they from? I'm not sure how many, Fireheart admitted. 5 or 6 at least. But they didn't have the scent of any clan. He wrinkled his nose as he remembered. They smelled of crow food, which made me sure they weren't kitty pets either. Bluestar looked thoughtful, and to Fireheart's relief, her hostility towards him seemed to ebb away. How recent was the scent? She asked. Quite recent, but I didn't see any other cats there. Except Tiger Claw, he added silently. But Fireheart decided not to tell Bluestar that part of the story. The leader was in no mood to listen to any more accusations against her deputy, and he had no evidence anyway that Tiger Claw had had anything to do with the unknown cats. Rogues from Two Lake Place, perhaps? Bluestar guessed. Thank you, Fireheart. I'll tell the patrols to keep a lookout when they go that way. I don't suppose there any threat to ThunderClan, but we can't be too careful. Fireheart padded toward the camp with a vole clamped firmly in his jaws. The sun shone from a brilliantly blue sky, and already 2 days after his meeting with Princess, most of the snow was gone. Buds were swelling, and a mist of tiny green leaves was beginning to cover the trees. More important, prey was reappearing in the forest. Already it was easier to replenish the pile of fresh kill, and for the first time in moons, the clan was full-fed. Fireheart arrived in the clearing to find the queens raking out old bedding from the nursery. When he had dropped his prey on the pile of fresh kill, he went across to give them a hand, pleased to see Cloud Kit was helping too. I'm going to show the other kits the good place for moss. The kit mewed proudly as he staggered past with a load of bedding. Good idea, Fireheart agreed. He'd noticed that even after Tiger Claw relieved him of his duties with the elders, Cloud Kit had gone on helping. Maybe at last the kit was feeling some spark of loyalty towards his adopted clan. Watch out for badgers, though. Just then, he saw Goldenflower emerge from the nursery, pushing a ball of solid moss in front of her. Her belly was round with the weight of the kits she was carrying. "Hello, Fireheart," she meowed. "Isn't it great to see the sun again?" Fireheart gave the queen's shoulder a friendly lick. "Soon it'll be New Leaf," he mewed. "Just in time for your kits. He broke off and spun around as he heard Tigerclaw's voice behind him, speaking his name. "Fireheart, if you've nothing better to do than stand around gossiping with the queen, I have a job for you." Fireheart bit back an angry response. He'd been hunting all morning and paused for only a few moments to talk to Goldenflower. "I want you to take a patrol along the border of RiverClan," the deputy went on. "No cat has been that way for a few days, and now the snow has gone, we need to renew the scent markings, and make sure no RiverClan cats are hunting in our territory. If they are, you know what to do." "Yes, Tigerclaw," Fireheart mewed. Hedgehogs must be growing wings, he thought, if Tigerclaw had chosen him to lead a patrol. Then he realized that Tigerclaw was too clever to behave hostilely toward him in public. The deputy would be careful to treat him just the same as any other clan warrior in case Bluestar noticed. "But I still don't trust you," Fireheart thought. Aloud he meowed. "Whom shall I take with me? Any cat you like, or do you need me to hold your paw?" Tigerclaw added with a sneer. "No, Tigerclaw." By now Fireheart could barely keep his tongue curbed. He would have loved to swipe a claw over the deputy's scarred muzzle. He mewed a hasty goodbye to Goldenflower and headed for the warrior's den. Sandstorm was there, lying on her side and energetically washing, while Graystripe and Running Wind shared tongues nearby. "Who's up for a patrol?" Fireheart called. "Tigerclaw wants us to check the RiverClan border." Graystripe scrambled to his paws right away at the mention of RiverClan, while Running Wind got up more slowly. Sandstorm paused in her washing and looked up at Fireheart. "Just when I was hoping for a bit of peace," she complained. "I've been hunting since dawn." But her tone was good-humored, not remotely as unfriendly as she was when he had first arrived in the clan. Fireheart thought, and almost at once she got up and shook herself. "All right," she mewed. "Lead on." "What about Brackenpaw?" Fireheart asked Graystripe. "Do you want to bring him along?" White Storm and Mousefur took the apprentices out. Running Wind explained. "All of the apprentices. More fool them. They're hunting fresh kill for the elders." Fireheart led the way out of the camp, feeling a tingle in his paws as he leapt up the side of the ravine. It felt like moons since he had a good run without snow to freeze his paws off, and he wanted to stretch his muscles. "We'll head for the Sunning Rocks," he meowed, "and then follow the border up to Four Trees." He set a brisk pace through the trees, but not so fast that he failed to notice the brilliant green fronds of new bracken beginning to unfurl, or the first pale buds of primroses pushing out of their green coverings. Birdsong filled the air, and the fresh scent of growing things. He slowed down to walk as the patrol approached the edge of the forest. Ahead of him he could hear the sound of the river, free at last from its bonds of ice. "We're almost at the border," he meowed quietly. "From here on we have to keep alert. There may be RiverClan cats about." Graystripe stopped and opened his jaws to drink in the scent from the breeze. "I can't smell any," he reported. Fireheart wondered if he was disappointed that Silverstream wasn't nearby. "Besides, they'll have plenty of prey now that the river's unfrozen," Graystripe added. "Why should they come and steal ours?" "I wouldn't put anything past RiverClan," growled Running Wind. "They'd steal the fur off your back if you didn't keep an eye on them." Fireheart saw Graystripe beginning to bristle. "Oh, come on then," he meowed hastily, trying to distract his friend before he said something that gave away his divided loyalties. "Let's go." He raced away through the last of the trees and burst out onto open ground. What he saw there brought him skidding to a halt, and the memory of his dreams crashed into his mind like a thunderclap. In front of the cats, the land sloped gently down to the river, or what had been the river. Swelled by the melting snow, the fast-flowing water had burst the banks and risen until it lapped the grass barely a rabbit length from Fireheart's paws. The tips of the reeds just showed above it, farther upstream. The Sunning Rocks were gray islands in the mist of a shimmering silver lake. The thaw had certainly come, but now the river was in full flood. Chapter 11. "Great Star Clan!" breathed Sandstorm. The other cats grunted in agreement, but Fireheart was speechless with horror. He had instantly recognized the shining expanse of water, and now he recalled Spotted Leaf's ominous words, "Water can quench fire." Fear chilled him as he struggled to understand how this flood could threaten his clan, so that he was hardly aware of Greystripe trying to attract his attention until the big gray cat pressed up close to his side. Panic flared in Greystripe's amber eyes, and Fireheart didn't need to ask why. His friend was afraid for Silverstream. The land was lower on the River Clan bank, so the flooded waters could spread much farther. As for the clan on the island, Fireheart wondered how much of that was underwater. He had grown to like Silverstream in spite of his concerns, and he felt a grudging respect for Mistyfoot and Greypool too. He didn't want to imagine them driven out of their camp, or worse, drowned. Running Wind had padded right to the water's edge, and was gazing out across the river. River Clan isn't going to like this, he remarked, and a good thing too, it'll keep them off our territory. Fireheart felt Greystripe tense at the note of satisfaction in Running Wind's voice. He shot his friend a warning glance. Well, we can't patrol the border now, he pointed out. We'd better get back to camp and report this. Come on, Greystripe, he added firmly, seeing the warrior look once more with anguish across the swollen river. As soon as Bluestar heard the news, she leapt to the top of the high rock and gave the familiar call. Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath High Rock for a clan meeting. At once cats began to pour out of their dens and into the clearing. Fireheart took his place at the front of the crowd, noticing with a prickle of annoyance that Cloudkit had come bouncing along after Brindleface, although he was too young to attend the meeting. He saw Yellowfang and Cinderpaw listening from the mouth of the fern tunnel. Even Brokentail emerged from his den, nudged along by Mousefur. The bright morning was coming to an end. Clouds were massing to cover the face of the sun, and the gentle breeze had strengthened until a stiff wind blew across the clearing, flattening the fur of the cats who crouched around the high rock. Fireheart shivered, and didn't know whether it was from cold or apprehension. Cats of ThunderClan, meowed Bluestar. Our camp may be in danger. The snow has gone, but the river has burst its banks. Part of our territory is already flooded. A chorus of dismay rose from the clan, but Bluestar raised her voice above the owls. Fireheart, tell the clan what you have seen. Fireheart stood up and described how the river had overflowed near the Sunning Rocks. It doesn't sound that dangerous to us, meowed Darkstripe when he had finished. We have plenty of territory left for prey. Let RiverClan worry about the floods. A murmur of approval broke out, although Fireheart noticed that Tigerclaw stayed silent. He sat at the base of the high rock, motionless except for the twitching of the tip of his tail. Silence, spat Bluestar. The water could spread here before we know it. Something like this is bigger than clan rivalry. I don't want to hear that any RiverClan cats have died from these floods. Fireheart noticed a hot glow in her eyes as she spoke, as if her words meant more than she had said. Puzzled, he remembered how angry Bluestar had been with him for speaking to RiverClan warriors, yet now her strength of feeling suggested a current of sympathy running deep within her. Patchbelt spoke up from among the elders. I remember the last time the river overflowed many moons ago. Cats from all clans drowned. Prey drowned too, and we went hungry, even though our paws stayed dry. This is not just RiverClan's problem. Well said, Patchbelt, meowed Bluestar. I remember those days too, and I hoped I would never have to see such times again. But since it has happened, these are my orders. No cat is to go out alone. Kits and apprentices must not leave the camp without at least one warrior. Patrols will go out to discover how far the floods reach. Tigerclaw, see to it. Yes, Bluestar, meowed the deputy. I'll send out hunting patrols too. We must build up a stock of prey before the water rises any further. Good idea, agreed Bluestar. She raised her voice again to address the whole clan. The meeting is over. Go to your duties. She leapt down lightly from the high rock and padded across to talk with Patchpelt and the other elders. Fireheart was waiting to see if Tigerclaw would choose him for a patrol when he noticed Greystripe edging away from the circle of cats. Fireheart headed after him and caught up just as he broke for the gorse tunnel. Where do you think you're going? He hissed in the Grey Warrior's ear. Bluestar just said that no cat should go out alone. Greystripe turned a panicky look on him. Fireheart, I have to see Silverstream, he protested. I have to be sure she's okay. Fireheart let out a long sigh of exasperation. He understood how his friend was feeling, but he could hardly have chosen a worse time to go visiting his mate. How would you get across the river? I'll manage, Greystripe promised grimly. It's only water. Don't be such a mouse brain, Fireheart spat, remembering the time Greystripe had fallen through the ice. when Silverstream had rescued him. You nearly drowned once before. Wasn't that enough for you? Greystripe didn't answer. He just swung around and made for the tunnel again. Fireheart glanced over his shoulder. The other cats in the clearing were breaking up into small groups under Tigerclaw's direction, ready to go out on patrol. Stop, Greystripe, he hissed, halting his friend at the entrance to the tunnel. Wait there. Once he was sure Greystripe had done as he asked, he bounded across the clearing toward the deputy. Hey, Tigerclaw, he meowed. Greystripe and I are ready to go. We'll check the River Clan boundary downstream of the Sunning Rocks, all right? Tigerclaw narrowed his eyes, clearly displeased that Fireheart had taken it upon himself to choose which area he was going to patrol. But he had no reason to refuse, especially with Bluestar in earshot. All right, he growled. Try to bring some prey back as well. Yes, Tigerclaw, Fireheart replied, dipping his head before turning to race back to Greystripe. Okay, he panted. We're on patrol, so at least no cat will wonder where we've gone. But you... Greystripe began to protest. I know you have to go, Fireheart meowed, but I'm coming with you. He felt a prickle of guilt as he spoke. Even on patrol, he and Greystripe wouldn't be expected to cross clan boundaries. Bluestar would be furious if she knew that two of her warriors were risking their lives to go into enemy territory when their own clan needed them so badly. But Fireheart couldn't just stand there and let Greystripe go alone. His friend could be swept away in the floods and never return. Thanks, Fireheart, murmured Greystripe as they left the tunnel. I won't forget this. Side by side, the two warriors scrambled up the steep, rocky slope. As they headed into the forest, retracing the steps of their earlier patrol, Fireheart noticed how muddy the ground was under paw. The melted snow had soaked the earth like the heaviest rainfall, even without the deadly spread of the floodwater from the river. When they reached the edge of the trees, Fireheart realized that the water had risen even farther. The Sunning Rocks were almost submerged now, and the current swirled around them in tight circles. We'll never make it across there, he meowed. Let's head downstream, Greystripe suggested. We might be able to use the stepping stones? We can try, Fireheart mewed uncertainly. He was about to follow his friend when he thought he heard something, a thin, wailing sound, above the wind and the rushing of the torrent. Wait, he called. Did you hear that? Greystripe looked back, and both cats stood, ears pricked, straining to catch. Then Fireheart heard it again, the panic-stricken mewing of kits in distress. Where are they? He meowed, looking all around, up into the trees. I can't see them. There, Greystripe flicked his tail in the direction of Sunning Rocks. Fireheart, they'll drown! Fireheart saw the current had driven a mat of twigs and debris up against the Sunning Rocks. Two kits bounced precautiously on it, their tiny mouths stretched wide as they wailed for help. Even as Fireheart watched, the current tugged at the mat, threatening to sweep it away. Come on, he yelled to Greystripe. We've got to reach them somehow. Taking a deep breath, he waded into the flood. The water soaked into his fur at once, and paralyzing icy chill crept up his legs. The tug of the current made it harder to stay on his paws with every step he took. Greystripe splashed in behind him, but when the water reached his belly fur, he stopped. Fireheart, he choked out. Fireheart twisted around to give him a comforting nod. He could understand how the river might terrify Greystripe after his near drowning a few moons ago. Stay there, he meowed. I'll try to push the mat over to you. Greystripe nodded, trembling too violently to speak. Fireheart waded forward a few more paces, then launched himself into the current and began to swim, thrashing his legs instinctively to push himself through the black water. They were upstream of the Sunning Rocks. If StarClan was kind, he should be carried down toward the kits. For a moment he lost sight of them in the wind-ruffled waves, though he could still hear terrified cries. Then the smooth gray bulk of a Sunning Rock loomed up beside him. He kicked out strongly, fearing one panic-stricken heartbeat that he would be swept right past. The current swirled, Fireheart's paws worked furiously, and the river tossed him against the rock, driving the breath out of his body. He scrabbled against the rough surface, bracing himself against the rushing water, and found himself face to face with the two kits. They were both very small, still suckling from their mother, Fireheart guessed. One was black and one was gray, their fur plastered against their tiny bodies and their brilliant blue eyes wide with horror. They were crouched on a tangled mat of twigs, leaves, and two-leg rubbish, but when they saw Fireheart, they started to scramble towards him. The mat lurched and their wails grew louder as the river water sloshed over them. Keep still! Fireheart gasped, paddling madly against the current. Briefly, he wondered if he could climb onto the rock and haul the kits up with him, but he was not sure how long it would be before the sunning rocks were completely submerged. His best plan was still to push the mat over to Graystripe. Looking back, he saw his friend had already moved downstream into a good position to catch the mat as it was swept toward him. "Here we go," Fireheart muttered. "StarClan, help us." He pushed himself off from the rocks, thrusting at the mat with his muzzle to guide it into the current. The two kits whimpered and flattened themselves against the twigs. Fireheart put every last scrap of energy into pushing the mat ahead of him. With his nose and paws, he could feel exhaustion draining the strength from his limbs. His fur was soaked, and he was so cold he could hardly breathe. Raising his head and blinking water out of his eyes, he realized with horror that he had lost sight of Graystripe and the bank. It seemed as if there was nothing in the world but the churning water, the fragile mat of twigs, and the two terrified kits. Then he heard Graystripe's voice sounding close by. "Fireheart! Fireheart, here!" Fireheart thrust again at the mat, trying to propel it toward the voice. It spun away from him, and his head went under. Coughing and choking, he clawed his way back to the surface to see Graystripe pacing on dry land just a few tail lengths away. For a heartbeat, Fireheart felt relief that he was nearly there. Then he focused his blurred eyes on the kits again, and fear pulsed through him. The mat was beginning to break up. Fireheart watched helplessly as the twigs underneath the gray kit gave way, and the tiny creature was plunged into the torrent. Chapter 12. "No!" Graystripe yelled, launching himself after the drowning kit. Fireheart lost sight of them. The kit left on the mat squealed desperately, trying to cling to the twigs as they were split apart by the current. With the last of his strength, Fireheart drove himself forward, sank his teeth into the little creature's scruff, and kicked out for dry land. Within moments, he felt stones under his paws and managed to stand. Stone-limbed with weariness, he staggered out and dropped the black kit on the grass at the edge of the flood. Its eyes were closed. He was not sure if it was still alive. Glancing downstream, he saw Graystripe splashing out of the shadows with the gray kit gripped firmly in his teeth. He padded up to Fireheart and set it gently on the ground. Fireheart nosed both kits. They were lying very still, but when Fireheart looked closer, he could see the faint rise and fall of their flanks as they breathed. "Thanks, StarClan," he muttered. He began to lick the black kit as he had seen the queens in the nursery do to their little ones, rasping his tongue against the lie of the fur to rouse the kit and warm it. Graystripe crouched beside him and did the same for the gray kit. Soon the black kit twitched and coughed up a mouthful of river water. It took longer for the gray kit to respond, but at last it too coughed up water and opened its eyes. "Oh, they're alive," exclaimed Graystripe, his voice filled with relief. "Yes, but they won't live long without their mother," Fireheart pointed out. He sniffed the black kit carefully. The river water had washed off much of the clan scent, but he could still detect a faint trace. "RiverClan," he mewed, unsurprised. "We'll have to take them home." Fireheart's courage almost deserted him for good at the thought of crossing the swollen river. He had almost drowned rescuing the kits, and he felt exhausted. His limbs were cold and stiff, and his fur was soaked. He wanted nothing more than to creep into his own den and sleep for a moon. Graystripe still crouched over the gray kit, looked as if he felt the same. His thick gray fur was flattened against his body, and his amber eyes were wide with anxiety. "Do you think we can get across?" he meowed. "We've got to, or the kits will die." Forcing himself to his paws, Fireheart picked up the black kit again by its scruff and headed downstream. "Let's see if we can cross by the stepping stones like you said." Graystripe padded after him, carrying the gray kit through the wet grass at the edge of the floodwater. When the river was at its usual level, the stepping stones were an easy route across for RiverClan cats. The longest leap from rock to rock was no more than a tail length, and RiverClan controlled the territory here on both sides of the river. Now, floodwater completely covered the stones. But where they had once broken the surface, a dead tree, its bark stripped away, lay across the river. Fireheart guessed that some of its branches had been caught on the submerged stepping stones. "Thanks, StarClan," he exclaimed. "We can use the tree to cross." He adjusted his grip on the kit and waded out into the flood toward the splintered end of the tree trunk. The kit, seeing the churning water barely a mouth's length below its nose, began to mew and struggle feebly. Keep still, both of you," growled Graystripe gently as he set down the gray kit for a moment to adjust his grip. "We're going to find your mother." Fireheart wasn't sure if the terrified kit was even old enough to understand. but at least it went limp again, so it was easier to carry. He had to lift his head high to keep the tiny creature clear of the water as he floundered toward the tree. He reached it without needing to swim and sprang up, clawing for a grip on the soft, rotting wood. Once he had pulled himself up, his main concern was keeping a paw hold on the smooth, slippery trunk. Gingerly placing each of his paws in a straight line, Fireheart padded toward the opposite bank with the river churning beneath him, sucking at the tree as if it wanted to sweep it and its burden of cats away downstream. Fireheart glanced back to see Graystripe following with the gray kit, his face creased with determination. At the far end of the trunk divided into a tangle of broken branches. Fireheart ducked down to squeeze through them, being careful not to let the kit's fur catch on the splinters. It was harder to find a paw hold as the branches tapered, and he ran out of anything that might bear his weight when there was still a gap of a couple of fox lengths separating him from the far side of the river. Fireheart took a deep breath, flexed his hind legs, and leapt. His front paws hit the bank, while his hind paws kicked madly in the rushing current. As water splashed up, the kit started to struggle again. Fireheart kept his teeth clenched in its neck as he sank his front claws into the soft earth and scrabbled upward until he stood safely on the bank. He lurched forward a few paces and set the kit down gently. Glancing around, he saw Graystripe pulling himself out of the water a little way downstream. He lowered the gray kit to the ground and shook himself. The river water tastes foul, he spat. Look on the bright side, Fireheart suggested. At least it should disguise your scent. The River Clan cats won't know that you're the warrior who's been trespassing on the territory. If they ever found out... He broke off as 3 cats crashed into the bushes just beyond Graystripe. Fireheart braced himself as he recognized Leopard Fur, the River Clan deputy, and the warriors Black Claw and Stone Fur. Forcing his tired legs to move, he picked up the black kit and padded along the bank to stand beside Graystripe. The gray warrior hauled himself to his paws, and the 2 cats set down their burdens and faced their enemies together. Fireheart wondered if the River Clan cats had overheard what he was saying to Graystripe. He knew that he and Graystripe were too exhausted to stand up to the patrol of strong, fresh warriors, and his head spun as he tried to summon enough energy for a fight into his frozen paws. But to his relief, the River Clan cats halted a few tail lengths away. "What's this?" growled Leopard Fur. Her golden spotted fur bristled, and her ears were flattened against her head. Beside her, Black Claw stood with his lips drawn back in a snarl. "Why are you trespassing on our territory?" he demanded. "We're not trespassing," Fireheart meowed quietly. "We pulled 2 of your kits out of the river and wanted to bring them home." Do you think we nearly drowned ourselves just for fun?" Graystripe blurted out. Stonefur paced forward until he was close enough to sniff the 2 kits. It's true, his blue eyes widened. They're Mistyfoot's missing kits. Fireheart stiffened in amazement. He knew that Mistyfoot had recently had kits, but hadn't realized that the kits they had rescued were hers. He was even more thankful now that they had been able to save the kits' lives, but he knew they mustn't let any of these cats know that Mistyfoot had friends in ThunderClan. Leopardfoot did not relax the fur on her shoulders. "How do we know that you saved the kits?" she snarled. "You might have been trying to steal them." Fireheart stared at her. After risking their lives in the floodwater, he couldn't believe that they were actually being accused of stealing the kits. "Don't be such a mouse brain," he spat. "No cat from ThunderClan tried to steal your kits when we could walk across the river on thin ice. Why do you think we'd try it now? We nearly drowned." Leopard Fur looked thoughtful, but Black Claw stalked up and thrust his head aggressively into Fireheart's face. Fireheart snarled, ready to counter a blow. "Black Claw," Leopard Fur meowed sharply. "Back off. We'll let these cats explain themselves to Crooked Star and see if he believes them." Fireheart opened his mouth to protest, but left the words unspoken. They would have to go with the River Clan cats in their exhausted state. He and Graystripe had no hope of winning a fight. At least Graystripe would be able to check on Silverstream. "All right," Fireheart meowed. "I just hope your clan leader can see the truth when it's in front of his nose." Leopard Fur led the way along the bank, while Black Claw picked up one kit and stalked threateningly alongside Fireheart and Graystripe. Stonefur brought up the rear, carrying the other kit. When they reached the island where the RiverClan cats had their camp, Fireheart saw that a wide channel of racing water separated it from the ridge of dry ground retching at the overhanging boughs of the willow trees. No cats were visible through the reeds, and Fireheart could see silver water lapping among the bushes that concealed the camp. Leopardford paused, her eyes widening with alarm. "The water has risen since we left," she meowed. As she spoke, a yowl came from behind them at the top of the slope, where Fireheart and Greystripe had hidden to talk to Silverstream. "Leopardfur, up here!" Fireheart turned to see the RiverClan leader, Crooked Star, emerging from the shelter of the bushes. His pale tabby coat was soaked, fur sticking out in all directions, and his twisted jaw made him look as if he was mocking the patrol and their prisoners. "What happened?" Leopardfur demanded as she reached her leader. "The camp is flooded," Crooked Star replied. His voice was flat with defeat. "We've had to move up here." As he spoke, 2 or 3 other cats emerged cautiously from the bushes. Fireheart noticed Greystripe brighten when he saw one of them with Silverstream. "And what have you brought us?" Crooked Star went on. He narrowed his eyes at Fireheart and Greystripe. "ThunderClan spies. As if we didn't have enough trouble." "They found Mistyfoot's kits," Leopardfur told him, nodding to Stonefur and Blackclaw to bring forward the kits. "They claim they pulled them out of the river." "I don't believe a word of it," spat Blackclaw, setting down the kit he carried. "You can't trust a ThunderClan cat." At the mention of the kit, Silverstream had turned and disappeared rapidly under the bushes again. Crooked Star padded forward and sniffed the pathetic bundles. By now they had begun to recover from their ordeal and were trying to sit up, though they still looked completely waterlogged. "Mistyfoot's kits went missing when the camp flooded," Crooked Star remarked, turning his cold green gaze on Fireheart and Greystripe. "How do you come to have them?" Fireheart exchanged an exasperated glance with Greystripe, exhaustion making him short-tempered. "We flew across the river," he mewed sarcastically. A loud yowling interrupted him. Mistyfoot broke out of the bushes and came racing over to them. "My kits! Where are they?" She crouched over the tiny scraps of fur, staring wildly around as if she thought the other cats would try to take them away from her. Then she began licking them furiously, trying to comfort both of them at once. Stonefur pressed up close against her and mewed comfortingly into her ear. Silverstream followed more slowly and stood beside her father, Crooked Star, eyeing the ThunderClan cats. Fireheart was relieved to see her gaze pass with apparent indifference over Greystripe. She would not give them away, he was sure. More cats emerged after her and gathered curiously around. Fireheart recognized Greypool, who gave no sign that she had ever seen him before, and Mudfur, the RiverClan medicine cat, who crouched beside Mistyfoot to examine the kits. All of the RiverClan cats were wet through, and the fur clinging to their bodies showed they were skinnier than ever. Fireheart had always thought of RiverClan cats as plump and sleek, well fed on the fish from the river. That was until Silverstream told him the 2 lakes had stayed by the river during Greenleaf, and stolen or scared away most of their prey. The 2 lakes had left the forest now, during Leaf Bear, but RiverClan had been unable to hunt when the river froze, and instead of bringing much-needed food, the thaw had driven them out of their camp completely. In spite of his pang of pity, Fireheart could also see the unfriendliness in their eyes, the hostility in their flattened ears and twitching tail tips. Fireheart knew he and Greystripe would have to work hard to convince Crooked Star that they had really saved the kits. The clan leader was at least prepared to give them a chance to explain. "Tell us what happened," Crooked Star ordered. Fireheart began at the point when he had heard the kits wailing and seen them stranded on the mat of debris in the river. "Since when have ThunderClan cats risked their lives for us?" Blackclaw broke in contemptuously, as Fireheart described how he had pushed the kits through the torrent to the riverbank. Fireheart bit back an angry retort, and Crooked Star hissed at the warrior. "Quiet, Blackclaw. Let him speak. If he's lying, we'll find out soon enough." "He's not lying." Mistyfoot looked up from where she was still nuzzling her kits. "Why should ThunderClan steal kits when all the clans are finding it hard to feed themselves?" "Fireheart's story makes sense," Silverstream observed calmly. "We had to abandon the camp and shelter in these bushes when the water started to rise again," she explained to Fireheart. "When we came to move Mistyfoot's kits, we could only find 2 of them. The other 2 were missing. The whole nursery floor had been washed away. They must have been swept along the river to where you found them." Crooked Star nodded slowly, and Fireheart realized that the hostility of the RiverClan cats was fading, all except for Blackclaw, who turned his back on the ThunderClan warriors with a snort of disgust. "In that case, we're grateful to you," meowed Crooked Star, though he sounded grudging, as if he could hardly bear to be in debt to a pair of ThunderClan cats. "Yes," mewed Mistyfoot. She looked up again, her eyes glowing softly with gratitude. "Without you, my kits would have died." Fireheart dipped his head in acknowledgement. Impulsively, he asked, "Is there anything we can do for you? If you can't go back to your camp, and if prey's scarce because of the flood—" "We need no help from ThunderClan," growled Crooked Star. "RiverClan cats can look after themselves." "Don't be such a fool." It was Greypool who spoke, with a glare at her leader. Fireheart felt a new surge of respect for her. He guessed that not many cats would dare to take that tone with Crooked Star. "You're too proud for your own good," the elder spat. "How can we feed ourselves, even with the thaw? There are no fish to eat. The river's practically poisoned. You know it." "What?" Greystripe exclaimed. Fireheart was too shocked to say anything. "It's all the fault of the Two Legs," Greypool explained to them. "Last New Leaf, the river was clean and full of fish. Now it's filthy with two-leg rubbish from their camp. And the fish are poisoned," Mudfur added. "Cats who eat them fall ill. I've treated more cats for bellyache this leaf bear than in all the time since I've been the medicine cat." Fireheart stared at Greystripe and then back at the hungry RiverClan cats. Most of them couldn't meet his eyes, as if they were ashamed that a cat from another clan should know about their troubles. "Then let us help," he urged them all. "We'll catch prey for you in our territory and bring it to you until the floods have gone and the river is clean." Even as he made the offer, he knew that he was breaking the warrior code that demanded loyalty to his own clan alone. Bluestar would be furious with him if she found out he was prepared to share ThunderClan's precious prey like this. But Fireheart couldn't bring himself to abandon another clan in their need. Bluestar herself said our welfare depends on having 4 clans in the forest, he reminded himself. Surely it's the will of StarClan. "Would you really do this for us?" asked Crooked Star slowly, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Yes." "And I'll help too," promised Greystripe with a glance at Silverstream. "Then the clan thanks you," grunted Crooked Star. "None of my cats will challenge you in our territory until the floods go down and we can return to our camp. But after that, we will fend for ourselves again." He turned and led the way back to the bushes. His subdued cats followed him, casting glances back at Fireheart and Greystripe as they went. Not all of them, Fireheart could see, trusted them or believed in their offer to help. Last to go was Mistyfoot, nudging her kits to their paws and guiding them up the slope. "Thank you both," she murmured. "I won't forget this." Fireheart and Greystripe were left alone as the RiverClan cats disappeared into the bushes. As they picked their way down the slope again toward the river, Greystripe shook his head in disbelief. "Hunting for another clan? We must be mad." "What else could we do?" Fireheart retorted. "Let them starve?" "No, but we'll have to be careful. We'll be crow food if Bluestar finds out." "Or Tigerclaw," Fireheart added silently. "He already suspects Greystripe and I have friends in RiverClan, and we could be about to prove him right." Chapter 13. It was a cold, gray morning. Fireheart dragged himself reluctantly out of his warm nest and padded over to nudge Greystripe. Greystripe twitched and settled down again, with his tail wrapped over his nose. "Go away, Fireheart." Fireheart lowered his head and butted the broad gray shoulder. "Come on, Greystripe," he whispered into his friend's ear. "We've got to hunt for RiverClan." At that, Greystripe levered himself upright and parted his jaws in an enormous yawn. Fireheart felt just as tired as his friend. Supplying RiverClan with fresh kill, as well as keeping up with their duties in ThunderClan, was taking up all their time and energy. They had crossed the river with prey several times, and so far, their luck had held. No ThunderClan cat had found out what they were doing. Stretching, Fireheart glanced cautiously around the den. Most of the warriors were curled among the moss, too sound asleep to ask awkward questions. Tigerclaw was just a mound of dark tabby fur in his nest. Fireheart slipped out between the branches of the den. At first he thought that all the other cats were asleep. Then he saw Brindleface appear at the entrance to the nursery and lift her face to sniff the air. As if she didn't like the raw, damp wind that greeted her, she retreated almost at once. Fireheart looked back at Graystripe, who was shaking scraps of moss off his coat. "Okay," he meowed, "we can go now." The two cats bounded across the clearing toward the gorse tunnel. Just as they reached it, a familiar voice behind them called out, "Fireheart! Fireheart!" Fireheart froze and turned around. Cloudkit was scampering toward him, yowling, "Fireheart, wait for me!" "Fireheart," growled Graystripe, "why does your kin always turn up at the most awkward moments?" "StarClan knows," Fireheart sighed. "Where are you going?" Cloudkit panted excitedly as he skidded to a stop in front of the warriors. "Can I come with you?" "No," Graystripe told him. "Only apprentices can go out with warriors." Cloudkit shot Graystripe a look of dislike. "But I'll be an apprentice soon, won't I, Fireheart?" "Soon isn't now," Fireheart reminded him, struggling to keep calm. If they hung around much longer, the whole clan would be awake and wanting to know where they were going. "You can't come this time, Cloudkit. We're going out on a special warrior mission." Cloudkit's blue eyes grew round with wonder. "Is it a secret?" Yes, hissed Graystripe, especially from nosy kits. I wouldn't tell any cat," Cloudkit promised eagerly. "Fireheart, please let me come." "No," Fireheart exchanged an exasperated glance with Graystripe. "Look, Cloudkit, go back to the nursery now, and maybe I'll take you out later for some hunting practice, okay?" "Okay, I suppose." Cloudkit looked sulky, but he turned around and trailed off in the direction of the nursery. Fireheart watched him until he reached the entrance, and then slipped into the mouth of the tunnel. Moments later, he was racing up the ravine with Graystripe at his side. "I just hope Cloudkit doesn't tell the whole clan we went out early on a special mission," puffed Graystripe. "We'll worry about that later," Fireheart panted. The two warriors headed for the stepping stones. The fallen tree was still there to help them cross the river, and hunting close meant they had less distance to carry with the fresh kill, and were less likely to be spotted. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the daylight had grown stronger, but the sunrise was hidden behind a mass of gray cloud. There was a spatter of rain in the wind. Fireheart couldn't help feeling that all sensible prey would be curled up in their holes. He raised his head and sniffed. The breeze carried the scent of squirrel, fresh and not far away. Cautiously, he began to stalk through the trees. Soon, he caught sight of his prey searching among the breeze at the foot of an oak tree. As he watched, it sat up and began to nibble on an acorn, held between its front paws. "If it knows we're here," Graystripe breathed in his ear, "it'll be up that tree in a flash." Fireheart nodded. "Circle round," he muttered. "Come at it from that side." Graystripe slid away from him, a silent gray shape in the shadows of the trees. Fireheart flattened himself into the hunter's crouch with the ease of long practice and began to creep up on the squirrel. He saw its ears prick and its head swivel around as if something had alarmed it. Perhaps it had seen a flicker of movement from Graystripe or caught his scent. While it was distracted, Fireheart hurled himself across the open ground. His claws pinned the squirrel to the forest floor, and Graystripe ran forward to finish the struggle. "Well done," Fireheart grunted. Graystripe spat out a mouthful of fur. "It's a bit old and stringy, but it'll do." The two warriors continued their hunt until they had killed a rabbit and a couple of mice. By then, although he could not see the sun, Fireheart knew it must be near sun-high. "We'd better take this to RiverClan," he meowed. "They're bound to miss us back at camp soon." Stumbling slightly under the weight of the squirrel and one of the mice, he led the way to the fallen tree. To his relief, the water was no higher, and the crossing seemed easier now that he had done it several times. All the same, Fireheart felt uneasy as he scrabbled through the branches, knowing that he was in full view of any ThunderClan cat who happened to be patrolling the forest edge. He and Graystripe swam the last couple of foxlinks and pulled themselves out of the river on the on the River Clan side. When they had shaken the water out of their fur, and they slunk quickly toward the bushes where River Clan had made their temporary camp. A cat must have been on watch, because as they approached, Leopard Fur emerged from the bushes. "Welcome," she meowed, sounding a lot friendlier than she had when she first came upon them with the 2 kits they had rescued. Fireheart followed her into the shelter of the hawthorn branches, remembering how he and Greystripe had hidden there to wait for Silverstream. The River Clan cats had worked hard since the floods forced them out of their camp, bringing moss for bedding and scraping out a place beside the roots of a large bush where fresh kill could be stored. Today there was little more than a pitiful collection of a few mice and a couple of blackbirds, which made the ThunderClan warriors' contribution all the more necessary. Fireheart dropped his prey onto the pile, and Greystripe did the same. "Is that more fresh kill?" Stonefur appeared with Silverstream just behind him. "Great. We have to feed the elders and the nursing queens first," Leopard Fur reminded him. "I'll take some for the elders," Silverstream offered. She turned a long look on Greystripe and meowed. "You can help me. Fetch that rabbit, will you?" Fireheart felt a sudden jolt of alarm. Surely Silverstream wouldn't risk spending time alone with Greystripe in the middle of her own camp. On their earlier visits, she had kept her distance. Greystripe didn't need another invitation. "Sure," he mewed, grabbing the rabbit and following Silverstream out of the bushes. "They've got the right idea," meowed Stonefur. "Fireheart, do you want to bring the squirrel to the nursing queens? Then they can thank you themselves." Feeling somewhat dazed, Fireheart agreed. Following Stonefur, he reflected again how strange it was to look at the River Clan warrior and know that he was half ThunderClan, especially since Stonefur himself didn't share that knowledge. In the makeshift nursery, Fireheart was pleased to see Mistyfoot again, stretched out on her side while her kits suckled contently. But he couldn't help worrying about Greystripe. Once he had greeted the queens and helped them divide up the squirrel, he murmured to Stonefur, "Can you show me where Greystripe went? We ought to be getting back before any cat notices we're missing." "Sure, this way," meowed Stonefur. He led Fireheart to a spot farther along the ridge, where 3 or 4 elders were crouched on a bed of heather and bracken tucking into the fresh kill. Already not much was left of the rabbit except a few scraps of fur. Greystripe and Silverstream were watching in silence, sitting side by side but not quite touching, with their tails wrapped around their paws. As soon as they saw Fireheart, they sprang up and padded over to him. Greystripe's yellow eyes blazed with a mixture of excitement and fear. "Fireheart," he blurted out, "you won't believe what Silverstream just told me." Fireheart glanced behind him, but Stonefur was already disappearing off into the bushes. The elders, having just eaten, looked sleepy, and none of them were paying attention to Greystripe. "Okay, what?" Fireheart mewed, his fur starting to prickle with unease. "But keep your voice down." Greystripe looked ready to burst out of his skin. "Fireheart," he whispered, "Silverstream is going to have my kits." And that is where we will end for the night. I hope everyone enjoyed listening, and I hope you have a good evening and a good night. Till next time, my friends.